I think the whole idea was poorly planned. Is there an issue with feral cattle? Yes. But to what magnitude? I think it's minuscule compared to the feral horse problem that we have in New Mexico, to the massive elk populations that we have in New Mexico. That is what is deteriorating the streams, the quality of streams, the grazing of the animals. It's these massive elk herds that we have. It's the fact that we have entered into a treaty with New Mexico to the numbers of wild horses we'll keep. But wild horses are the darling of the American spirit. So we look by that. But if you see the damage that these wild horses, because the numbers have gotten so great, have done to our environment, and we look at basically a handful of cattle, but right now, because of the environmentalists, because of the green people are just looking at cattle as a bad animal. But yet they never came to the Cattle Growers Association. They never reached out to the people in those environments and said, let's sit down. What can we do? They can have ranchers go out there. Even if they slaughter those cattle, they'll be prepared to load them. They'll have their tractors there, load them cattle, get them to the butcher, get them to be processed, and that meat can be donated. So I think that this was extremely poorly thought out. They didn't discuss it with the community. They didn't discuss it with the groups that care. Nobody cares for the environment more than the cattle industry, than the cattleman, because he's gonna go back there year after year after year and put them cattle on there to graze. And so he's going to take care of that because those permits allow him to stay in business. And the Forest Service has a history in New Mexico of working against the cattlemen of New Mexico. They're always the first to pull the permits and last to open up areas for New Mexicans. The Forest Service bans uh, uh, grazing because there's a possibility of the the jumping mouse in some forest areas. Never been a sighting of a jumping mouse, but they say it's the perfect environment for them. So they close off the streams to shoot an animal, especially the size of cow. Unless it's a perfect kill shot, that cow is going to be going wandering for days, weeks before they may finally fall. So you talk about the suffering. I ask PETA, I ask all of these animal right groups, where are you? Why are you silent on this? The most brutal way of actually killing an animal or treating an animal, the Forest Service is doing it and you remain silent on this. And that's appalling. We have an opportunity to fix a wrong here. Get with the Cattle Growers Association, get with the local ranchers that are up there. And I tell you, if you paid them X amount of dollars per head of cattle, it's going to come out an awful lot cheaper than flying that helicopter and paying for these hunters to go out there and take care of that. And we need to quit letting these so-called city experts determine the fate of our mountains like California did.
Yeah, so Defenders comes at it from the wildlife standpoint. As you probably know, these feral cattle have been an issue for about 2 decades or more at this point, and they're causing a lot of harm to the riparian areas and just the ecosystems in general. About cattle in general, they tend to trample the areas near rivers, which can cause erosion, and it reduces the amount of plant life in the near the waterways, and they can also cause like collapsing of burrows for small mammals and for snakes. So for us, it was we've always supported them removing the cattle, and this is something that's been in the works for a long time. They've done roundups in the past, and there was still at the beginning of this year, if my counts are correct, were about 250 cattle that were still up there. And just due to the location and the ruggedness It's unfortunately seemed like the best option. And again, from the wildlife standpoint, given all of the threatened and endangered species in the area, it was something that needed to be addressed. Yes, and a lot of the cattle, at least in the past, have been they've died on the way down when they've been round up. There's a lot of stress also involved in rounding up cattle as well.
It reflects that they are not going to take local input on certain operations within the Forest Service. Obviously, local community standards are not considered. You know, we do have rights. We have surface rights to that grass. We have surface rights to that property in our allotments, and it brings to question how secure are those rights. So obviously, when they took that grazing permit or grazing allotment that was there originally, they retired it when they went through bankruptcy. You know, if somebody would have been utilizing that allotment again, there would not be a feral cattle problem, because that person would be there working the problem every single day. And I think we are underestimated in the value farmers and ranchers have on our public lands. We were sending proposals in. We had not gotten to the point that we were listened to, I should say, you know. And so what we were all united in was that aerial gunning shouldn't be on the table. That's what we were all united in. You know, there's 550,000 acres in the Gila Wilderness area, and we're talking about 200 head of cattle on a place that would easily run probably close to 2,000. So it's not a major impact like they're talking. Yes, those herds are not being managed, but they're still migrating around, and it's all one big open pasture. You know, there's no subdividing it. So, and you know, part of the issue too is the Forest Service has not maintained the boundary fences to the wilderness in years and years and years. There is no contractor doing that for the Forest Service. So I guess, you know, if good fences make good neighbors, the Forest Service is kind of falling short on that measure.
About a year ago, not quite a year ago, there was some talk coming out of Grant County that the Forest Service wanted to do this, and we immediately reached out to the Grant County cattle growers. We met with at that time Director Christensen, the director of the U.S. Forest Service, in my office in DC. We were meeting her with my staff on several issues, but we asked her about this idea of going after these feral cows with a helicopter and shooting them. She absolutely had no idea about it and told our office that that would not happen on her watch. And really, I believe because of our communication with her, she ended up just putting the brakes on it, and therefore no one heard about it again. Then fast forward, she since retired. A new director, Director Moore, came into the U.S. Forest Service, and out of nowhere, the Forest Service local on the ground comes up with this idea that they were going to go back to this shooting the cattle from a helicopter. We learned about this on a Monday morning, and they were planning to execute their plan on Tuesday. All the stakeholders should have a say in this, and we should really make methodical decisions that really work for everybody. They were sent photographs of hoof prints in the Gila River, cow hoof prints. And I said, who sent them? They said a hiker. And we said a hiker with the biological, you know, Centers for Biological Diversity. And they said yes. So number one, that's the science we're talking about. Photographs taken by a hiker from a special interest group. And that propelled them to, number one, take a helicopter into a restricted area, because this is a designated wilderness area. Unbranded cattle in New Mexico belong to the state. I myself personally extended an invitation to the new director to come to New Mexico and visit with all the stakeholders, with Lauren Patterson, with Karen Cowan, with myself, with some of the ranchers in the community, because we had given them some suggestions on how we could maybe move these feral cows off of this Gila by repopulating some of the allotments in the adjacent allotments that are empty. So when there is a cattle kill on a property by a wolf, the rancher is responsible at their own expense for removing the cow carcass, as to not entice other wolf kills in the area. Who went down to the Gila in a helicopter in a restricted area on wilderness and shot 60 something head of cattle and did not remove one of them. Now, they did go down and remove the 2 out of the Gila River, but they did not remove any of the cattle carcasses. So we've essentially set up a buffet for our wolves, who we already see that we have a major problem with, these predatory animals being given more rights than our ranchers. Now they've cut the herd of the Gosses down to 100 cows. That's death by 1,000 cuts, and that puts a rancher out of business in this state. There just seems to be no collaboration and no willingness on the side of the federal government to sit down and have honest conversations and really work together. And we should be protecting them, opening up the opportunities for them to do what they know how to do best, which is grow food. They do it right. All the people, in my opinion, that either live in or around our natural resources, live in or around our natural resource and use them for feeding cattle, for allotments, for oil, gas, for timber. These are the best stewards of our land. The uncertainty, not only in the country, but globally, we're really now being forced with having to see our food producers make those decisions of, is it worth it to grow food? Can they afford it between the costs of, fertilizers and feed? And I mean, whether they're raising beef cattle or if they're raising, a pen full of, pigs or chickens or whatever, or even a crop full of watermelons or onions or chili, just the expense of doing any of this right now, the uncertainties with weather, the last thing they need is a heavy-handed government who won't get out of the way and give them some leeway and trust the producers of American food to do what they know how to do and do it right. And I have every bit of trust in the American food producer, regardless if it's beef or coming out of a crop.
This instance, the ranchers called me regarding the concern that the feral cattle were being slaughtered via helicopter and sharpshooters, so that the concern is that also the carcasses were not being disposed of properly and being left in where they fell, and then creating issues with the predators. Concerns that we have, and it seems that the rangers had already had meetings to some of the policymakers about being able to round up the cattle and slaughter them, and then utilize the beef for use in possibly the school system. We have had concerns expressed to us by the stockmen about the overpopulation of wildlife, and especially elk, which are heavy animals, hardening the ground, not enough predators to be able to reduce that wild habitat. And like I said, people who have lived in those areas for centuries and generations have a good feel for what has worked for them in the past. So those are the concerns that we have with regard to this policy that could, possibly be replicated elsewhere. Not a good practice. So, well, that is that's an issue that has been brought to us by the Northern New Mexico stockmen about the reduction in grazing allotment, especially for the Latino ranchers. A concern that we have expressed to the regional forester, but something that has not really been addressed. So we're concerned about that. We haven't had much success with the Forest Service with regard to some of those issues, but we continue to work on them. And, as long as they have concerns that we can take to the Congress, especially right now that we're working towards deliberations for the 2023 Farm Bill. That's very, very important to us to have the input of this because they're a major component of our organization. Over 60% of our membership are stockmen.